I'm not an accelerationist, and I'm not rooting for people to suffer or for the economy to crash to the point where people are losing their jobs and their homes, and there's a ton of like food insecurity and all that. And at the same time, I do find myself asking myself from time to time, like, does it need to get really bad before people finally start to understand like how bad Republican policies are in the modern era? Like, I don't know the answer to that question. Have we considered that Trump is just giving the stock market a haircut? He messed it up, so now he's got it bald. Well, I'm seeing some people say that it's the bond markets that probably caused this reversal. But to be honest with you guys, I have no idea what even are the bonds. Like, what does all that mean? Chilled, tell me what a bond is. Wait, hop in my Discord and just tell me what a bond is. The bond yield? I don't know what that means. What is a bond yield? Chilled.
Hey, how are you?
What's up, man? How you been?
I've been good. I've been living through this. I think we all have been.
Yeah, crushing it on Twitch, by the way. You started making it like streaming a big part of your shit like 2 years ago, right? 3 years ago?
Yeah, I think since when the Among Us thing dropped. No, I just been it for the last 4 or 5 years. You were definitely right in terms of jumping on that early, because I feel like that's it just makes so much more sense.
Nice.
So with the bonds, I don't know if you're specifically asking in terms of like a 10-year bond, or if you're talking T-bonds, which are 20 and 30-year bonds, but both of them should fall under the same principle of, if you're buying them from the Treasury, you're buying our debt. And the government's essentially saying, so let's say you take out $100,000 in bonds from the government. The government's essentially saying that in X amount of years, we will give you back the principal plus the interest rate. So kind of the way a CD works. The cool thing though about a bond is you can actually trade the bond as opposed to, let's say, a CD where you're locked in with a bank or something. So you can be collecting on that bond year after year, essentially dividends from that bond. It's safe. It's backed by the U.S. government. So if the U.S. government goes down, then you kind of lose it. And then you can essentially just trade it back. Now, that's just the general understanding of from economics back 10, 15 years ago. But the way it's always been kind of explained to me is that you trust the government to not default. So you are loaning them money and then they're paying you back dividends. I guess, I don't know if it's biannual, if it's annual. So that's what I did that maybe about 6-7 months ago, because what I've been doing is a mix of CDs, a mix of Lightstar Market, and then US Treasury bonds, just as a way to do to keep up with inflation and to kind of set the portfolio out 10, 15, 20 years. So the dividends, again, small dividends, but they are comparable to safe investments. So if you're going to essentially, because I don't like to do anything risky, that's just me, I've always been that way. So if you want like a guaranteed 4 or 5% back over and over and over again, you could do treasury bonds. And prior to what's kind of going on, the US was always considered like a safe place to, loan your money to, and they'll pay you back. So that's my understanding of it. If things are different, I have definitely more to hear it out, but this is a rudimentary take on it from 15 years ago at college.
So why, explain to me, why are the bond markets crashing more concerning than stocks crashing?
So it's not really, I don't think they're crashing. They're just
declining.
A little more wild. It's just, so what's kind of happened, because T-bonds are longer, the 10 years are obviously shorter. What's happening is people are essentially now trying to collect, everyone's collecting on their, let's say, their 10-year bonds. So what kind of happens is you are flooding the market now with these 10-year bonds. People are like, all right, I want out. And it's essentially cashing in all of your coupons a little early. So if you have everybody trying to cash something in, and you unfortunately either don't have enough supply or you can't sell these to other people, you're kind of left just paying out debt without taking money in. So
and the length of the bonds have to be relevant too, right? So like if somebody's like trying to sell their like 10-year bonds, they're saying that they don't have certainty about the US economy over a 10-year stretch, whereas like the stock market may be more indicative of like short-term gain and loss.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So it's yes and no, because what I was looking at with the different bonds, and these are T bonds, so I don't know if it works too different than the 10 years. You can get different rates, but they'll just pay out dividends either shorter or longer. So like what I should say is they'll pay it out more often than not. So you can get, like, say, for example, a 4%. It's weird. So, and someone's gonna have to correct me on this. Let's say you buy 1,000 bonds, right? And you're supposed to be getting 4% back. You can buy cheaper bonds for like kind of like the double the price, or for half price, but get 2% back. So there's different ways that you can do it as well. And some of those are more valuable than others, because sometimes people would rather have it where it's like, okay, if I'm buying 1,000 bonds, or $1,000 worth of bonds, I want 1,000 of them at this rate, as opposed to I'm buying $1,000 worth of bonds, but I'm getting 2,000 bonds back, but they're at a lower interest rate. So there's different ways that people do it, but the main thing is the issue right now is too many people are cashing in on their bonds early, and they don't want to hold U.S. debt. So I don't know if that's going to be a large issue from what I've seen, because when I was looking at this 6 months ago, the bond rate was at like 4.8, 4.9. Then obviously they're around 4.5 now. So it's not like a complete crash of it, but it's going down. But I think most of us, and maybe again, I could be different. I feel comfortable as long as something's over 4%. I feel pretty comfortable with that and where I'd throw money at it. Once it gets under 4%, then you have to start comparing like, okay, is the bond market even keeping up with inflation? And if our bond market, our US bonds cannot even keep up with inflation, we're in trouble. So if you ever see our bond market start to dip down into, let's say like, I don't know, 2.9 or 3%, then that's not good, because then there's no way your bonds won't even outpace inflation. But essentially, everyone's cashing their coupons in now.
So what are the like negative externalities of everybody flooding the market with like trying to sell their bonds? Like how does that manifest into actual like tangible downsides? Like, does it impact interest rates? What does it impact directly?
So that I wish I could tell you that. I don't necessarily know. I mean, you're going to have a supply increase, and then people can either pick them up for less or more. I don't think it works the same way as if like there's traditional supply and demand, where it's like, oh, you have 5 Nintendo Switches, but 100 customers. So obviously you can price the console higher. I think it works a little bit different like that, because can't these also be traded on like a third-party marketplace? So it's not necessarily like you don't have to buy them from the government. You can also buy them from somebody else. So it feels like, I don't know, because you can get them straight from the government, you can get them from somebody else, you can look for who's selling them cheaper. So it's that one's a little confusing. I don't know. It kind of feels like it's just magical at that point. But it is like what someone just said right there. It's a good comment, Walshy. It implies a recession because nobody wants to invest anymore, which doesn't. That's the general idea. It means people don't want to give us their money, which is bad. But it doesn't necessarily imply a recession. It implies more uncertainty in what the U.S. is doing.
It implies at the very least a higher risk of recession.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. You had the CEO of Chase go on yesterday, and he was saying that we're headed towards a recession, or we're in a recession. So it's not good when obviously large institutions or heads of large institutions are saying that. But I would just.
Is JP Morgan and Chase, are they the same? Didn't they merge at some point? Isn't it JP Morgan Chase?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Same.
So it's JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs, I think, both came out with like different.
Oh, Goldman Sachs said that too?
I believe Goldman Sachs. It was either Goldman Sachs or some other big bank, but there was one bank that said that they're projecting a 60% chance of recession, and then another big bank said, I think, a 40 or 45% chance. And those numbers are going up month over month. Like they seem to be, the likelihood keeps increasing.
It's like, can we trust banks though? And not to be like a conspiracy person, but like, anything they say, is it going to kind of be a little, there could be bias to it, right?
I'm not qualified to answer that question. Yeah, I don't know. No, it seems like on its face though, they might be like really good sources of this kind of information because they have such an investment in the markets.
Exactly, so, right? That's their whole thing. But my only issue is like, okay, by them saying a recession's heading to, does that make them more comfortable? Because let's say people start saving more, and where do people usually save? In banks, and does that's banks fair. More leeway? Yeah. So that's my only issue.
But I don't know. That doesn't seem like the math would math there. Like banks, do you think banks are actually rooting for a recession because more people are going to save their money? But what if the value of the dollar goes down and unemployment spikes and GDP goes down? That doesn't seem like a good way to offset that?
Well, banks make their money through loans primarily. So, for example, let's say the interest rates go down, right? And people are putting all their money in the bank. If the interest rates go down and the banks are only going to give crap rates for their savings, bad rates for their CDs, and then they could charge, because people still need mortgages, people still need to lend or still to borrow from the bank. So I don't know if it really affects them either way, but them having more capital to work with means they could loan more money, in which they're always going to be ahead of the curve when it comes to loaning, right? They'll give you
Hold on, let's ask Twitter's Grok. Are recessions good for banks? I feel like there's no way that they are.
I would, I don't know. But if in my mind, like, let's say they do put all their money into their, let's say someone puts all their monies into their savings account. You just gave the bank essentially, let's say we'll just use $1 million. $1 million to do with as they please, as long as they can pay you back, right? But of course, they're going to take from, let's say, you to pay for me if I ever want to withdraw my $1 million. But we just gave them $1 million to essentially loan out to someone at a higher rate than they'll ever pay me back as. So it just kind of feels like, as long as they have money, as long as people keep putting money into the banking system, they're going to be fine. Although maybe the growth will be slower. I don't know, but I'm sure the banks are always going to be fine.
Grok says it's a mixed bag for what it's worth. It's not a simple yes or no. Yeah.
So kind of what we were feeling. Although for me, it's always a funny situation when the Fed lowers the interest rate. Because like I love playing conservatively and safely when it comes to bonds and CDs. So when they drop that, the bonds and CD markets go down, which kind of stinks. But in the same vein, the prices of the price of houses go up, and that kind of stinks. But you can get money cheaper, but you can also sell your house for more money if you already bought. So it's kind of like an inverse thing where at least now I'm poised in the situation where if the bond markets go down, okay, I can sell my house for more money. Or sorry, if the interest rates go down, I can sell my house for more money. But if the interest rates go up, my house is going to become worth less money, but the bonds and my long-term plan and long-term future savings will go up.
Gotcha.
So,
yeah.
It's tricky. I just don't. Here's my thing. Someone made up a good point. I forgot who I was watching the other day. There was an interview, and it was about just kind of like the fair America has loss. And I appreciate that. Like, no one can come to your house to a certain extent and just take all of your money. And that's a good thing. So I don't like that we're going down a path where those laws are kind of being skirted a little bit, and it seems like you could just make free money. It's almost like the crypto exchange is becoming the stock market and the stock exchange, where rules aren't being enforced, market manipulation is in full effect, the laissez-faire economy completely destroyed, and you have one guy who's just swinging it to his will.
He tweeted out shortly before the announcement, Trump, I think 3 hours before, tweeted out, now's a great time to invest in the market. And then 3 hours later, he comes out with this news. And then you also have to wonder if there were any White House insiders that were privy to this information that, changed their position ahead of time. Like, it's like full on corruption, obviously. And then he's got his meme coin. Anybody can just dump millions of dollars into his meme coin if they want to curry favor with him. It's crazy. It's like, this is an unprecedented level of corruption at the highest level. And this, like, a lot of people have lost faith in America altogether. And you hear a lot of people say like, well, it's always been corrupt, but not this level of just like out in the open. Right. Yeah.
So like when you come from, this is what always, and again, this is more of a personal thing. Since I like to invest and play it safely, markets like this suck because I'm never going to be the guy who's like, oh, the market dropped 20%. Let me throw all my money in. And then, okay, then all of a sudden Trump tweets it's good. And then, wow, look how much money I just made. That's the complete opposite of anything I would ever do. So these market fluctuations and people making bank is something I will never take part of. And most likely 99.9% of the people won't take part of. This does not help anyone unless someone's sitting on a lot of information about the president's going to do and $10 million in capital just to kind of throw around.
Yeah,
that's not the normal American. And here's the one thing I want to bring up, with just tariffs real quick, and you can give me your take on it. If we're dropping all those tariffs back down to 10%, and again, I know this is all bullshit anyway, so it doesn't matter. You can't rationalize what's being done. What is the purpose? Is it to protect American jobs and bring American jobs back here?
Or is it a negotiating? Yeah, right.
I can't figure that out.
It's different depending on the day. So MAGA yesterday, it was all, to bring manufacturing back. And today, all in unison, they're going to say, oh, it was all a negotiating tactic. Like you can't say
manufacturing anymore.
Like tariffs are either, like kind of good or bad, right? Like in terms of, well, targeted tariffs is one thing, but like the universal tariffs, it's like you can't turn around and say, I'm doing this to bolster domestic manufacturing and then turn around the next day and
JK, just to negotiate so we can get cheaper stuff from elsewhere. But now to hell with the American manufacturing.
Right.
It does not compute.
It's impossible to rationalize, but I think it's quite possible to understand. Like, I feel like Trump only sees upsides with tariffs. Like, I feel like he feels like it gives him a level of direct control over the economy. And I feel like that appeals to him as like a narcissist. He gets to just hand select winners and losers. There was some headlines this morning about how he was considering a massive relief package for farmers that would be disproportionately impacted by the tariffs. But at that point, he's just picking the winners and losers. Like, he is the ultimate arbiter of which industries thrive, or even more specifically, which companies thrive during these tariffs. But he also genuinely believes that tariffs are good policy. You can go back like 5 decades. There is footage. You can see footage of him from the 80s talking about how America's been taken advantage of and everybody's ripping us off and tariffs are the best thing in the world. So like it's a mixed bag with him. There's like corruption and ineptitude kind of all sort of packaged into one thing. I also think I've been saying it to there's all oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. So sorry. No, I was gonna say it's a corruption I can understand. It's the ineptitude that's confusing when you're surrounded by Yale graduates and Harvard graduates. When you just look into just the basics of this, like a trade deficit, right? It's just like, I don't know how you can explain that to anyone else, because I talk to Jess this all the time, and sometimes it's just like I just repeat myself, but it's like, how can you expect a country that is smaller in population, smaller in GDP, smaller in everything, for us to have completely balanced trade? It's just not physically possible.
Like, we're obviously going to have a trade deficit with Laos. You know what I mean? Like, they just don't have the same kind of
penguins.
Right. And the penguins, sure.
But like that's what's so confusing, because you just on its surface level, it just doesn't make sense. And there's too many people. Again, there are corrupt people in the government, but there's too many people who went to college and who studied these things that are just allowing it to happen. And those
people are not serving in his administration this time around. This time around, he made sure not to repeat the mistakes of his first administration. There were like 44, I think, officials that served in his cabinet that were telling voters, do not elect this man again. He had people that are perceived to be disloyal, people like Mattis and Tillerson, and his former chief of staff. That's pretty damning. When your former chief of staff, that person is attached to the president's hip every single day. And when the former chief of staff, who's also a retired Marine Corps general, comes out and said,
exactly,
this man is a fascist. He straight up is a fascist, and he has the worst authoritarian impulses. And people didn't listen. But this time around, he has staffed his cabinet with full on yes men. So I don't think he's fully aware of, I think he's aware of the markets. He says he's not paying attention to the markets, but I guarantee you he's keeping close track of that.
Oh, you have to. If you want to get elected. Well, again, he doesn't have to run again. Well, I mean, we allegedly. But the midterms are going to be an indictment on the first, on these policies more than anything. And what happens if you lose both the House and you lose the Senate? Then you're getting impeached regardless.
Well, we're not going to lose the Senate, but we're going to come up in the House like that. The Senate's just going to be a really tough map. That being said, if he straight up plunges us into a recession, all bets are off. We could take back the Senate. That's absolutely possible. We can see the consequences of massive economic downturns in blowout election after blowout election. Carter got blown out in the 80s because of this. H.W. Bush got blown out in 92 because of a recession. The Democrats just completely, that was the most dominant victory, aside from, I guess, Reagan, Mondale. But in terms of a trifecta, the Democrats had the biggest blowout in 2008 because of, this economic downturn. So that's the one thing that's sacrosanct in American politics. It's the one fundamental, if you're a politician, if you want to be successful, is the economy. And particularly with Trump, it's just so tied to his, not just reputation as president, but his brand is all about financial success. And he somehow duped all these voters in 2024 into thinking that he was the reason why the economy did so well in the first part of his term, obviously pre-COVID. But he was just riding off the coattails of Obama. If you ask them, what policy did he do, during his first term that helped the economy? I don't know, 99% of people, they're going to say tax cuts or whatever. It's trickle down on economics. But if you with that fundamental, all of a sudden the map is wide open for Democrats. And so it'll be really interesting to see. He says it's a 90-day pause on the reciprocal tariffs. who knows? Like, I feel like if he backs off now in the way that he's already done, it just kind of exudes weakness. It's just it's more or less a concession that, you know, this was bad policy to begin with. Obviously, they're going to try to spin it as like, well, look at all these countries that are trying to negotiate with us now, but that doesn't change the fact that you erased a year's worth of stock gains in 3 days. Like, how could that ultimately have benefited us? But yeah.
Exactly. You get nothing from it. We have gotten nothing in terms of concessions from other people. You enter into a trade war now with China, which again, it's fine if you wanted to target China as a one-off and you want to target certain sectors. Like obviously, yeah, their EV market. Yeah, you need to target China's EV market if you want America to have an EV market, because you just can't compete with sub $10,000 electric vehicles. So I get that. But when you piss off everybody at the same time, it just doesn't make sense. I think I'm just more annoyed that when he says this is going to be a victory for the American people, or this was a victory for the American people, and people believe it, like what do you do then? It's just like you just have to live with some of these delusions.
Well, you can get away with that kind of like, what do you call it, Schadenfreude or whatever, Schadenfreude. You can get away with that kind of like blatant lying when we're talking about issues that don't really directly impact people. Fact of the matter is he's keeping in place 10% universal tariff on all imports. That has not changed, and people will feel the impacts of that pretty much immediately. And so if he's telling people like everything's fine, the economy's doing great, but they're going to this, it's the same thing with Biden. It was like the big criticism that I had for Biden, like 2 years or 3 years into his presidency, is he was trying to package what was happening in the United States as Bidenomics. And while it was true that we were faring way better than every other developed nation in the world, people were still hurting. And so people were like, what the f is Biden? Bidenomics to me is me going to the grocery store and seeing higher prices. It was just such a blunder when it came to messaging. It was so stupid. And it's the same thing that applies to Trump. He can try to tell people like, oh yeah, everything's great. You know, we're getting all these deals, trillions of investment, blah, 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 blah. But at the end of the day, if these people are going to like Best Buy or the grocery store and they're all of a sudden priced out of products that they normally weren't priced out of, they're not gonna believe him when he says that everything's great. They're gonna look at their bank accounts. They're gonna look at their wallets and they're gonna be like, I'm not feeling this.
That was the I was laughing, and I'm sure you saw it too, with now that you have you can I guess pay over time for your DoorDash order. That's never a good thing in an economy.
You can get DoorDash on layaway. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and then I always laugh at the joke when you see the really hot girl driving for Uber, you know you're in a recession. That one always makes me laugh too. But no, it was just those two things just made me laugh. But hopefully, I'm still rooting for Trump to do well, even though I don't like the guy, because it's the American people, it's the American economy. I still want America to be the leader of the free world, even though it's
I don't buy that. I think that's too diplomatic. I think you should root against Trump because you want America to succeed. So like when people say like, well, I want him, he's the president. Yeah. I want him to succeed. It's like, well, what if his policies are bad? Then obviously I don't want him to succeed because I think his policies are going to hurt the country. So I'm actively rooting for him to fail. I don't have the same.
But how much stomach for failure can you take? That's my issue. It's just like, how much can we take before you're like, oh, maybe this broken clock, he finally got one right. And like things are kind of level out a little bit.
I feel like 99%, there's some things that he does that I don't necessarily disagree with, but literally 99% of the stuff that he does, I think actively hurts us. And so,
I agree. It's just, you're right. And sometimes it's like, okay, do I cut my nose to spite my face type thing? I still have that little optimist outlook like, okay, maybe we can just kind of weather the next 3.5 years. But you're right. If they kind of get their way for what they want with everything, then it's going to be very hard to fix that in 3.5 years.
I mean, like, I'm not rooting for him to break things to the point where it's difficult to repair. I want him to fail so that doesn't happen, is where I'm coming out of.
Okay, so not necessarily, you don't want the policies to fail. You want him to be roadblocked.
No, I'm saying if his policies are successful, like case in point, the tariffs, he will do actual harm. Therefore, I want his policies to fail. I want him to back off these tariffs because I don't want people to suffer. That's what I mean.
I think there was a miscommunication. Yes, completely agree. I want, obviously, his bad policies to fail, but I'm just kind of hoping, America does not suffer too much of a consequence under it, even though we know we are. That's like just a little optimism. Obviously, bad policies should not be enacted, but you still kind of got to hope that the country can still do okay for the next 3.5 years. But that doesn't mean his policies not getting pushed through.
I mean, are you familiar with the concept of accelerationism?
I mean, as a word, yes, but maybe not in politics.
In politics, it means that you're actively rooting for systems to break and buckle. Therefore, you can basically spawn a new political movement. So like there's right-wing accelerationists who, are rooting for, the stock market to crash. So in their minds, so they can pursue protectionist trade policies. And then in left-wing accelerationists, they want Trump to burn it all down so they can, form a socialist government in the smoldering ashes of the American Republic or whatever. I'm not an accelerationist, and I'm not rooting for people to suffer or for the economy to crash to the point where people are losing their jobs and their homes. And there's a ton of like food insecurity and all that. And at the same time, I do find myself asking myself from time to time, like, does it need to get really bad before people finally start to understand like how bad Republican policies are in the modern era? Like, I don't know the answer to that question. And so, I'm looking for silver lining. Like if the economy does really start to buckle, if he continues with this volatility or whatever, I'm hoping that America, because like for some reason, the Republicans have done such a good job of convincing American voters that they're the fiscally responsible party, which is insane. It's
their marketing is wild. It's the same type of marketing that I have like with me and Monopoly. It's like, oh, Chilled can't be beat when it comes to Monopoly. It's like, nah, bro, because a shitload of luck. But you build up this persona of like 10 years of winning Monopoly that people start to believe that like you're incredible at this thing. It's the same thing with Trump. It's like kind of like, okay, they built up this personality of like, oh, excellent trade deal, wrote the book on it. I saw that Jon Stewart clip where it's like, okay, in chapter 9 of The Art of the Deal, he talks about how, he's getting into casinos, but he ended up bankrupting the casinos. So if you read The Art of the Deal prior to knowing that he bankrupted the casinos, you think he's doing something smart, but then the future kind of shows you, oh wow, he collapsed those. So it's, yes, I agree with you in that instance, but I don't want shit to break enough where like it can't be fixed in the future. That's my
no, neither do I. I'm not rooting for that. But part of me thinks that things might have to break like not permanently, but enough to cause enough pain to like wake voters up. Like, wait a second, are Republicans the party that's like great for the economy? Why do I think that? Like,
no, I think in that instance, you're 100% right. Like in terms of like, okay, what's that snap out of smelling salt moment where someone just wakes up from the cult coma and be like, oh shit, yeah, we've been going backwards for a while. So maybe you do kind of need things to be, I don't know. I hate, it's just like you hate rooting for, even people that are rooting for you to suffer and voting for policies for you to suffer. I don't know. It feels also weird, but like saying like, oh, well, I hope these guys really get over so they know their consequences. And obviously, in a sports type politics, you always feel that way. But at the end of the day, it's like, oh man, I really don't want people to get over.
Yeah, you don't want political like engagement or discourse to destroy your capacity for empathy. So like, even though I obviously disagree with like most voters in South Carolina or whatever, if there's a natural disaster, I'm always in my head thinking like, great, send the federal government in, give them whatever they need. Exactly. I'm not like rooting for people to, right? Even if they don't, even if they were,
yeah,
exactly. Especially when it came to these California fires, like my God, the kind of post that we
fault you had fires. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But if as soon as you start rooting for people to like, profoundly suffer, then I think politics, you should probably take a break from politics for like 6 months and go pursue hobbies that you enjoy or whatever.
I like that you say that routinely sometimes. It's like, if it's a stressful day, maybe don't look at politics this week. Because sometimes it is true. If you're treating it like, I mean, I know a lot of people treat it like you're scoring points when the other side loses. And I get that because you're trying to make a certain point that these policies aren't working or this agenda isn't working. But I don't know, man. A lot of people are getting caught in that crossfire, and it's weird. And again, I'm very fortunate in my position, so sometimes it's like, oh, I'm just a gaming content creator, and like that's my job. But also, it's like, you see your family around you, and you see people who just aren't able to pay the bills, and they bought into the MAGA stuff, and you're like, man, I can't convince them. We can have as many conversations as we want. I can't convince them. Maybe this will finally be the wake up call for them. It's a weird balance between like empathy and then also you get what you deserve. But I just fucking stability, man. Just stability.
I'm a big proponent of not discussing politics with your family if you want to keep a relationship with them. And as far as like checking out, I mean, I checked out of politics for like a good 5 years when I was first building up the YouTube or whatever. But what preceded that was me, like, I was very engaged in politics at a pretty young age, because September 11th happened when I was 18 years old. I was like a freshman in college. So that's like right when you're starting to, break out of that high school bubble and start to cultivate an understanding of the world that you inhabit. And, I just devoured every book that I could find about like the anti-war movement from the 70s and the civil rights struggle and the history of like labor rights in this country and all the sort of like black stains on the country's history or whatever. And then when Bush was reelected in 2005, that was like, or 2004 rather, that was like brutal for me because I was so invested in the Iraq war. Like I was reading about it hours and hours every day. And when the country reelected him, I felt so deflated that I just kind of checked out for like several years. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It was just like, I got to a point where it was actually making me miserable day to day. And so I just chose to focus on other things like my friends and relationships and hobbies and chess and video games. And then when I was in a better place or whatever, like I'm much more balanced about it now. Like the way that I consume politics now is like when I'm done streaming or whatever, I go and take a walk or I call a friend or I do things that I enjoy. I cook, like I have to you have to intentionally make time for things that make you happy. There's no nobility in suffering. Yeah. It's like, it doesn't make you a better person if you're constantly upset about Gaza. It doesn't make their lives better. It doesn't make your life better. You know what I mean?
You do need to dilute the amount of negative news that you get in a day. Right. Otherwise it does become overwhelming. But my thing is always going to be that, the policies and agenda from day to day, that can be nauseating and trying to kind of figure out, okay, how this is going to affect the world order? How is it going to affect, the stock market? But you just want to make sure that sometimes there's adults in the room. So even if when you want to check out, it's very hard to check out knowing like, oh, there might not be any adults in the room. Like if I just go sit in the backseat of the car, who the hell's driving? So like I get both perspectives. I really do. Like sometimes it's a little bit of anxiety inducing knowing that like, okay, I don't know what they're going to do in these 3 years. And then at my age and your age as well, that we still have time when it comes to investing and building up a nest egg and retirement. But I couldn't imagine being 60 years old, voted for Trump, and then not knowing, oh, wow, the economy's not looking good and I have to retire in a few years. That just feels... That's daunting. And I only chalk it up to, there's definitely some people who have hate in their heart when they voted, but I chalked it up a lot to education because way too many people Googled tariffs or what did tariffs do in the last 3 months, as opposed to, when he was actually running on this policy. So,
well, income and education levels were two lines that kind of, there was sort of like a realignment this election. It remains to be seen if it's a permanent realignment, but typically Democrats did better with voters who make under $50,000, under $100,000 a year. Democrats typically did 5, 10, 15 points better historically. And then with education levels, it used to be that people with bachelor's degrees and even to a higher degree, people with master's degrees increasingly favored conservative politicians. And that has switched in the Trump era. So now it's people that are more affluent and educated are more likely to support the Democratic nominee, and people who are now typically considered like working class. I mean, it's not like a complete blowout. It's like 53-47 or whatever, but there was like enough of a shift there to make a difference in the demographics. But I'm going to get back to reacting to the rest of this video, but it's good talking to you, man. You should come on again and we can do this again sometime.
I'm not educated enough. I don't watch it enough. But
you are too humble. You're a smart guy.
Oh, thanks, Hutch. Have a great stream, buddy.
Hey, take it easy.
Bye.
I like Chilled. Good guy. Super nice. Chilled is cool because you hang out. He's like there's a lot of influencers you hang out with, and they're just some of the most insufferable people you could imagine. They're just very self-absorbed, and they only want to talk about content and metrics and blah, blah, blah. And Chilled is not that. So just to give you guys a sense of who he is off stream, he's definitely a good guy. I like him.